Hey, everybody. So, for our Thursday, Friday lesson that is due on Monday at 3, instead of going further into the novel, we are up to chapter 6 so far. I wanted to stop us and get us to know a little bit about our two tribes that are present in the story. Okay, so as we already know, Salva's story takes place so far in southern Sudan in 1985, and he's a member of the Dinka tribe. Naya, her story takes place in 2008, and she's a member of the Nuer tribe. Okay, so she's also in southern Sudan. So, what we're going to be taking a look at today are a couple excerpts from an article named Sudanese Tribes Confront Modern War. And in this article, we are going to be learning a little bit more about the history behind the Dinka and Nuer tribes, okay, from the mid 1980s until the 1990s. All right, so be mindful. Salva's story is in 1985 and Naya's story is in 2008. Okay, so reading the directions for this assignment right here. Read the following excerpts or parts of the article Sudanese Tribes Confront Modern War by Carl Vick and answer the questions pertaining to the article using complete sentences and full detail. All right, so again, these two excerpts are from an article called Sudanese Tribes Confront Modern War, again, written by Carl Vick, and it was posted in a paper called Washington Post Foreign Services, and it was published on Wednesday, July 7th, 1999. All right, some of the information in the article is going to be given to us by this man named Madut Atienne. Okay, this is his picture right here. And he is a member of the SPLA. So, to remind you of what that is, that's the Sudanese People's Liberation Army. That's the rebel army in the south fighting against the entirety of Sudan becoming a Muslim country. And he and other members of the SPLA provided security for a peace conference where Carl Vick, our author of this article, got information to write this article. Okay, so what you're also going to see with the way that this is laid out is it's broken up into two different excerpts, so two different pieces from the article. You don't actually have the entire article here. And at the beginning of each article, you're going to get, or a few of the excerpts of the article, you're going to get a few definitions of words that you'll find in this article that I thought were a little bit tricky. All right. So you'll see that the definition of temporal is relating to worldly as opposed to spiritual affairs. So when you're talking about anything to do with religion or the spirit world, if you're talking about something being temporal, that means that it's of this world. It's not of the spiritual world. And then the second word that you'll see is rating. And any of my people who play a lot of video games, you probably know exactly what this word means. If you don't, then you might not. Raiding is to quickly and illegally take something from a person or place. All right. So what you're going to see is you're going to have the article on the left side of this document, and then you're going to have the questions on the right side of this document. These questions pertain directly to the article right to the left. You do not have to include textual evidence for any of the article-based questions. You only have to write incomplete sentences, being mindful of capitalization, punctuation, spelling, things like that. Make sure that you're answering each question if any of these questions requires multiple responses. And if you have any questions, of course, you can send them over to me. All right. So I'm going to read the article at this point, and then you can read the questions on your own and look for the answers. Okay. The paragraphs are numbered off to the left side here. Okay. So this is paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and so on. All right. So let's start with the first excerpt from the article titled Sudanese Tribes Confront Modern War, and let's get to know a little bit more about these two tribes that Salva and Naya are members of. Okay. So starting with paragraph 1. They are the Dinka and the Nuer, the largest tribes in southern Sudan. Both greet the dawn by singing. Both live in square huts with round, uneven roofs. Both walk the roadless plains split by the White Nile, and both honor their scrawny, hump-backed cattle as the center of the temporal world, at once wealth on the hoof and a mystical link to the spiritual plane or level. The Nuer word for thousand means lost in the forest, because that's where your cattle would be if you had that many of them. Almost no one does. However, in no small part because Dinka and Nuer have been stealing cattle from each other for as long as anyone can remember. Cattle raiding is a Maori or old and ancient tradition of pastoralists or farmers throughout East Africa, as natural here as a young man's hungering for enough cows to pay the bride price for a wife, also known as a dowry, as normal as a neighbor striking at the intruders he sees hogging prime grazing land. If people died in these raids, it was maybe 1, 2, or 3, said Madut. And the victims were almost always warriors, slain with the spears that were still the weapons of choice in southern Sudan in 1983, when the war against the Arab North entered its current phase. That year, the Khartoum government imposed or forced on others Islamic law on the entire country, including the parts that were not Muslim, like the South, where people mostly stick to the traditional beliefs or beliefs or Christianity. Rebellious Southerners formed the Sudanese People's Liberation Army, and young Dinka and Nuer began to carry AK-47s. It's a particular type of assault rifle. Okay, so that's excerpt 1. You can go ahead and answer the questions, reread the article as you need to be able to answer each question. All of the answers are in the article. Okay, moving on to excerpt 2. Your first word is coup, which means a sudden, violent, and illegal seizure of power from a government. Second word, anthropologist, a person who studies human societies and cultures. A decade means a period of 10 years. Moral means concerned with the principles of right and wrong. And roughshod means without thinking or caring about the opinions, rights, or feelings of others. So when you see these words bolded in the article, you may not remember exactly what the definitions are since we just covered them, but that doesn't mean that you'll immediately remember them. So go ahead and scroll to the top of the excerpt so that you can be able to remember what those words mean. Okay, same thing. You'll notice that we start with paragraph 4 here because this is still part of the same article. Okay, we've just taken part of it out. And the same thing, we're going to read through the article and there are questions pertaining to the article off to the right side. Okay, so after we read, you can go ahead and answer those questions. So starting with paragraph 4, until 1991, the guns were used mostly against Northerners. But that August, there was a split in the rebel army. The fault line was tribal. A Nuer rebel officer, Reich Makar, tried to topple the rebels' supreme commander, a Dinka named John Garang. When the coup failed, the rebel escaped with forces loyal to him, mostly Nuer. The war had entered a new phase. Southerners started killing each other. I used to be living here, said Peter Wykowick, a Nuer in Dinka land. The Dinka and Nuer were one. It all went bad overnight. Shortly after the rebel leaders parted ways, the man from the next hut stole all of Wycock's cattle and slit the throats of 4 of his children. Children, women, and the elderly used to be off limits during raids. Traditional set piece battles in which women waited at the edge of the fight to tend to the wounded and retrieve lost spears, said Sharon Hutchinson, a University of Wisconsin anthropologist who lived within the region for almost a decade. Now, 110 were killed in a village attacked precisely while its young men had gathered elsewhere. So that's 110 children, women, and elderly who were killed. Tradition in both tribes held that causing a death created spiritual pollution. A bit of the blood of any man a Nuer speared to death was thought to be in the slayer and had to be bled out of the upper arm by an earth priest. To drink or eat before reaching the priest was to die. But that was for a death by spear, pressed into victim by one's own muscle and bone. What to do about a death by bullets? A gun's calves, as the word translates from Nuer. Rebel commanders argued to chiefs that a gun death carried no individual responsibility, that traditional belief did not apply in a government war, and the guerrillas came to see it that way, which are guerrillas are soldiers of a rebel army. They believe the ghost of the deceased will not haunt me because I did not kill with a spear, said Talar Deng, an American-educated Dinka judge. Once removed from its moral consequences, killing became easier. Jacques Madut Jacques, an assistant professor of history at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, returned to his native Dinka land last summer to research the culture of violence. He found armed youths running roughshod in a society whose dysfunction paralleled that of inner cities 8,000 miles away. Arguments, once settled by fighting with sticks, were now being decided with assault weapons, so those AK-47s that were mentioned earlier. The warriors, Jock said, were simply too young to remember any power but the kind that came from a gun. The elders, however, could. Okay, so now that we've gotten through this article, these are the questions that you're going to answer pertaining to the article. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Once you're done with the questions from the article that, again, you don't need textual evidence for, you just fully need to explain yourself, you're going to go down to the connect the dots section. This section pertains to both this article and connecting this article to information that we see in our novel, A Long Walk to Water. Okay, so we're connecting historical context with our novel, things that actually happened in history with things we see happening in our story. Okay, so your first question, and again, please be mindful of the bullet pointed directions for each individual question. So, the two central characters in the novel A Long Walk to Water, Naya and Salva, are from two different tribes in South Sudan. Naya is a Nuer and Salva is a Dinka. What are some similar perspectives of people in the Nuer and Dinka tribes? So here you're going to answer this question using RAD, so two pieces of textual evidence. Make sure to explain both. You're going to want to use the above article to answer this question, okay? You probably want to mostly focus on excerpt 1. Next question. Salva's point of view in chapters 1 through 6 actually takes place before this period of time where the Dinka and Nuer used guns against each other. So remember that started to begin happening in 1991. Tension between the Dinka and Nuer is growing during Salva's journey, and this tension will result in fighting between the Dinka and Nuer by 1991. Your question, how does excerpt 1 of this article help us understand Salva's point of view in the story? Because the information from the excerpt 1 is during the same time period and would be relevant to Salva, what he knows of the Dinka and Nuer and their relationship to one another. And so answer that question pertaining to the information you have in the novel, as well as excerpt 1 mostly, okay? This one you're using RAD with just 1D, so you're only going to need one piece of textual evidence. Your final question, you're going to have to go back to your novel and turn back to Naya's story in chapter 6 to be able to answer this question. So how does the information in this article help give you a better understanding of the view of Naya's mother when her family stays at the lake camp? Be mindful of the time period of Naya's story. Okay, so remember that her story takes place in 2008. So all of the information that occurs here that we talk about in this article has already happened because the article was written in 1999. Okay, so Naya's story takes place about 9 years later. Okay, so turn back to Naya's story in chapter 6 to help you answer this question. Use RAD, so you need one piece of textual evidence to support yourself. You can either use the above article or you could use your novel to help quote yourself, to help quote and support your answer to this question. Remember, you have to make sure that you fully explain your quote after you use it and fully explain your answers and your reasoning. Okay, that is the entirety of this assignment that's due on Monday at 3. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to send me any messages. We can do a Google Meet. I can just answer your questions that you sent to me through Google Classroom or email. It's completely up to you. All right. I hope that you enjoy reading this article on your own as well. It's pretty interesting. And again, have a great weekend. Okay. Bye, everybody.